exalted, and I will praise his name. For he is the Lord, forever his truth shall reign. Heaven and earth rejoice in his holy name. He is exalted, the King is exalted on high. He is exalted. He is exalted, the King is exalted on high. And I will praise him. He is exalted, forever exalted, and I will praise his name.
All right, hi you guys. How you doing today?
Dan, good.
I'm so happy for this special edition of Faith Matters with two of my favorite people on campus, Anabella and Audrey. I'm going to let you introduce yourself a little bit and just talk about what you do here at Regis.
I'm Audrey Grace, and I have the pleasure of serving as the AVP for Inclusive Excellence and Chief Diversity Officer in the Center for Inclusive Excellence.
And we're neighbors across the hall,
We
correct?
are,
Yes,
yeah.
we are. All right.
My name is Anabella Morabito, and as you know, I serve here as Assistant Dean of Student Affairs. I'm in the Lower Student Center in the Res Life Suite.
So you're in the Student Center and you're an assistant dean. What did you do before that?
I was at CMS.
Oh, that's what you look
Associate
familiar. Yes,
Director.
yes, you were.
We were the
Oh,
ultimate
yeah.
neighbors. Yeah.
So thank you both. I know that you're very busy, but thank you for taking time to be with us today. So as you know, we call this Faith Matters, and we featured a lot of students in this. And we always begin with just a little conversation about, faith matters. So what does your faith mean to you? And as we sometimes say, how did you come to faith? What is your faith like today? And how did you come to that? What does it do for you on a day-to-day basis? And in no particular order.
Yeah, sure. Yeah.
Sure. So I was thinking about this last night because I know you ask every week, and I think that my faith journey, as with every human faith journey, has evolved, has changed. But there are, I think, two pieces of it that are central and remain central, and I think will continue to be central throughout my life. And one of those is it's so tied to my culture. It's inextricably bound to my culture. Anyone that has spent time in Latin America, in South America, knows that there's just these rites of passages in a person's life, and for better or worse, they're tied to the Catholic Church. So even, I have friends that have left the church, and understandably so, and they still have a devotion to Our Lady of Guadalupe, and they still have an understanding of a community of saints and role models that is larger than they are. And I think that's very Latin American. And that's a huge part of my faith experience. I don't think I'll ever leave the Catholic Church, but there's moments where I don't feel too proud to be a Catholic. Last week was one of those moments. But when I go back to that piece of it, I can connect with it.
Yeah.
The second piece is that I always say this, but I immigrated from Venezuela when I was 8, and the church was really helpful to my family in arriving to the States. So they helped with securing childcare and understanding resources and just having a community when you don't have family. And so to me, it's not only this understanding of faith and culture, but also how our faith communities call to respond to everyday life, beyond nurturing someone through the sacraments, right? So I think those two things remain central. It's a very, I don't want to use the word because it has a negative connotation, but don't misunderstand me. It's very mundane and ordinary, in the everyday interactions, in the relational aspects that I connect with God. And I have a harder time connecting with things that are very traditional, or even the sacraments, like, because I'm just very relational, and I'm very like down to earth, and so yeah, so I think those two aspects of my faith are key. And in times like now where I struggle with my faith, because I am struggling with my faith right now, those two things help me stay rooted, at least in the Catholic faith.
Yeah. It does sound like a mixed bag. Like there's a lot of things going on there, but still, feet still grounded in it to some degree. So
Definitely.
yeah, interesting. And Audrey, how about you?
Yes, so when I think about my faith, I think about so when you think about why we do what we do, or our sort of moral compass and center, and that's what faith is to me, the belief that we all have a higher purpose or a higher good that connects us all. I think it's probably sort of the nature of being human, the idea that we can't just be here alone, moving through this world without a sense of higher power, either constructing it or sort of forming our shared sense of justice. And so to me, that's faith. And it was interesting when I was in college. Our theology class was centered on learning how to or prayer. So it went through how different, and I'm separating faith from organized religion, but it went through how different organized religions speak to God. And to me, that was incredibly enlightening to show how no matter our differences, there are ways in which we communicate to God, whether it's a monotheistic belief or a polytheistic belief, that communities do come together and want to feel that shared connection, like you were talking about. And for me, I was baptized Catholic, and I find that when I go to Mass, that the ritual actually allows me to turn off my brain in a way that I feel like I more directly communicate to God. You know, you're not thinking about things are running in your mind. And because you can go through the motions in a way, it's almost like a meditation for those who practice or meditate. But back to faith, it's interesting. I asked my kids, I asked them in preparing for this. It's like, so how do you know the difference between right and wrong, right? So, like, how do you know what you're doing is right and what's wrong? They're like, I don't know, I just do it. And so to me, that's faith, like faith that you'll make the right decision, and to find that shared humanity amongst people.
That's interesting. I think one thing that we all have in common is you went to undergrad, you went to Fordham?
Fordham University at Lincoln Center.
Okay, so Fordham University, Jesuit school.
Go Rams.
They're Rams?
They're Rams,
I didn't know
I
they were
think.
Rams.
I wasn't really into the sports part of it.
Okay, questionable mascot, but anyway, then Anabella, you and I met when you were in grad school at Boston College, and I have a Jesuit background too, in education, so that's a particular lens. And one of the things that was helpful for me when I went to college was nothing meant really anything to me until I went to college, and it was really an encounter with the poor, and then questions about reflection. Was it possible that God was in that interaction with the poor, to go to a shelter with 300 homeless men, and to wonder what that's all about, and to experience that suffering, and to be with just the company there, and sit there with people. So that kind of, those kinds of questions led me to really, for me, to see I wanted a relationship with God. And as a Christian, it's a relationship with God through Christ, and the community is supposed to help and enhance it. And I found that sometimes it does and sometimes it doesn't. And that's where I struggle too. So it's not easy. But I feel like there's still enough good to keep me in the family, so to speak, the crazy family. But I wanted to ask too, since you both mentioned God, what is your image of God? What image of God is helpful and healthy and life-giving for you both?
Oh my gosh, so many.
It's an easy question, yeah.
No, it's not, because I don't want to put God in a box.
Mm-hmm.
And so I'm very hesitant to have an image that doesn't allow expansion.
Mm-hmm.
So the only image that I can muster that allows expansion is an image of love, right? But when I think of the person of Jesus, I think the quality that I most associate beyond love is the healing. And I say that because I just remember being in liberation theology with, or liberation Christology with Roberto Goizueta. and he talked about how sickness was seen was used as a way of marginalizing people in the ancient world. And so when Jesus healed people, it was a way of allowing them into the temple. And so that stuck with me, because it's not just about healing in the sense of healing someone. It's about healing someone so they can be part of our community. And so that really stuck with me as an image, because then you're in the peripheries, right? And you're trying to erase those margins. So it keeps expanding. So I don't know if that makes sense, but.
No, it makes sense, and that was just anyone who thinks that it's easy to come up with an image of God is going in the wrong direction, so I do appreciate that, it's not, How about for you, Audrey?
Yeah, it's interesting when you mentioned that, like, it's easy going the wrong direction. But I think, growing up, I was so ingrained, like, as soon as you said image of God, I had that picture that we all got in our childhood textbooks about, like the white guy in robes with the long, like, gray hair and the beard with the booming voice and maybe like a staff, right? And so,
a gift from the Bee Gees.
right, something like that, yeah, but probably like not as good of a dancer, I would say. But so that's when you say image of God, but that's the first thing that comes to mind. But when I think and I pause and I sort of unpack that notion that's not really, the image is separate from like my belief in what God does and the impact on my life and what I ask of God too. So, yeah. So the literal image versus the function of what God does for me is a little bit different.
And it's an interesting question too, because I think we've all had encounters with students that one of the first things, when appropriate, that I'll ask if they're interested in the conversation is to talk about their image of God. And there are some that are very helpful, there are some very destructive and unhealthy images. And I came across a line from somewhere, I can't find out where it came from, but I really like it. And the line is, any talk of God that does not bring joy is a lie. And I've shared that with so many people who I've seen trapped and enslaved by their faith and by this image of God that brings fear and wrath and guilt and smallness. So, it's an important question to ask and to get in touch with as well. How does what you understand as your faith, does it live at Regis in your work with students and for the things that you're working for on this campus?
100%. I think in the most obvious places, the charism of the sisters, but beyond the charism, the sisters, right? Like them as a symbol of that. We're so lucky to have them, and we're so lucky to get to connect with them and hear their stories. And I think as a woman, I also really appreciate that, because I understand that it's rather courageous that they did that, that they do what they do, that they're leaders in the field, and as someone who's in education, even more so, right? But in the students, yes. And I think it's interesting because we see it, but they don't, right? They have a hard time making those connections. And that's one of the things I really loved about being in CMS, but even in my role now, I get to do it, which is showing them that they can connect with that image here at Regis. And that although it's not an education that's trying to impose a certain religious tradition, it is an education that is allowing them to ask big questions and to expand on their understanding of why things are, and then to ask, the questions around how do you know what's right and how do you know what's wrong, right? Like about your own values. So yeah, 100%.
Oh yeah, same, definitely. And I would say that for anyone who's watching this who hasn't seen the video from Heritage Week from the sisters talking about their work from last Friday, they should watch it because they are an incredible group of role models for all of us. But yeah, in the work with students, definitely in my work, I try to live by, put good out into the world and good will come back to you. And I see that in our students. I think they come to Regis because they want to do good in the world. Whether it's, in healthcare or education or in communications or even, our student athletes in terms of their community building and team making and the impact they make on one another's lives and health and wellness. I see that in every student I meet, and virtually, hopefully eventually in person. So I do see them putting good out into the world. And to Annabella's point, I think sometimes it's hard when you get caught up in the little stuff of your day where you're just trying to pass your classes, or, for me, like get out a bunch of emails, that you sort of lose sense of the fact that you are putting good out into the world too. So helping the students see that is the work that CMS is doing, so thank you for that, and the work that you're doing.
That we all do is part of what it means to be here. And also, to be at a Catholic school, it's a loaded term. And when we've spoken with students, we speak with students on tour, we speak with parents and families, and some people lean in and some people cringe. It really is. And so a lot of times, we've decided years ago that rather than kind of teach people about it, we try to show them what it means to live it in terms of welcome. So I'll be in the office and I'll hear a tour go by in the pre-pandemic days. And the tour guides will say, well, this is Center for Ministry and Service, and they do a lot of stuff. And even if you're not Catholic, you can still be part of it. And we would run out the hallway and say, because we're Catholic, you can do whatever we do. That's what it means to be Catholic, is to welcome every student into what we do and to who we are. So it is a tricky thing to try to make this real and tangible, to do good in the world, to help students see that. The other option is to get frustrated that we don't have a million people at worship, or students don't seem to care about it, but they really do. They really do.
To that, I would say that, my experience in college and Catholic higher ed, and having working in a secular institution to compare it to, is that the critical conversations that I hear at Regis are not happening elsewhere, and I think it's a testament to Catholic higher ed. Sort of these critical reflections, these, if you are going out with a purpose of being in the world and doing good, to do so with a critical consciousness, I think is, you're going to make more of an impact in the long run, and I see that here.
The Christian world is entering Holy Week, beginning with Palm Sunday now, and then going in through Holy Thursday, Good Friday, and then Easter. And I'm just wondering if you have any thoughts about that, what it might mean for you, and maybe what you do with it, how you celebrate it, how you think of it, or whatever.
It's hard to think of it this year, right? Because it's going to look so different. I just remember, not last year because we were already in the pandemic, but 2 years before, we were at the Sisters for the Triduum.
Yep.
But I think for me, and maybe it is that cultural piece, right? We talked about this before the video started about Nicaragua. In Latin America, we focus a lot on the crucifixion, on the Stations of the Cross. And I remember, this is one of my favorite Holy Week experiences. In grad school at BC, we got a group of us together that went to El Salvador for the service immersion trip. And we had different people come together and write different stations that were modern day. So we talked about detention centers, and we talked about, women in abusive relationships, and we mirrored that with images of Jesus in the 14 stations. And I share that because it was the only time I did it. We should definitely bring something like that to Regis. And it was so meaningful because I do think there's something about Holy Week, and then of course ending in resurrection. We can't stay stuck on the crucifixion. But I think that a lot of people avoid the crucifixion because it's uncomfortable, and I actually gravitate towards it because I think that's where people connect. People in the margins connect with the faith. So for me, that's a really good memory of Holy Week. But it's also a reminder of what this week is about for me, right? What are those moments of crucifixion? What are those moments of waiting in between? Sometimes it feels like we're always in the waiting. And then what are those moments of resurrection? So although it looks different this year, I still have that same reflection.
Interesting, yeah.
Mine's opposite. Mine's totally the sort of positive sort of Easter egg hunt kind of things at the end. Except for my spouse keeps trying to get me to watch long 3-hour movies during this time.
Any in particular?
I don't know all of them. He's like, oh, Turner Class. Yeah, it's definitely focused on more of the, the aspects of just family coming together and all that fun stuff. So,
Which is important.
and of course, in Catholic higher ed, you get the day off. So
We'll say that's a huge plus.
Yeah.
don't get that everywhere. So.
That is true. So, at this point with students, after we have a conversation about faith, we offer to pray. So I'll do the same with all of us and just ask now, is there anybody or anything that you'd like to pray for?
Sure. I'll start us off. I would like us to keep all people at the border in prayer. We are seeing the need arise again. It was always there. And, just the amount of need, but also of welcome that we still lack as a country. And so I pray for that. I pray that we may have the openness to welcome refugees, as I'm sure Jesus would have done.
Do you want me to add a prayer for our students and getting through this end of the year, a tough year? They're strong. I pray for us all when we get back on campus that, we can take the good, leave the bad, come back stronger. Yeah, let's do that. Let's do that together. I can say something. Mm-hmm. So like to have a prayer for the victims of the shooting in Atlanta and Boulder, Colorado, and the victims of the countless number of mass shootings that have been going on in our country, and the victims of violence in our world that is ongoing right now, that they're in our thoughts and prayers, but thoughts and prayers are not enough, and that we commit ourselves to help people engage in action to help make change.
I'd like to pray for so many people that we know, and this, so many people who really question their own value, their own worth. They don't see what we do in them, the goodness, potential, and they struggle. And I think maybe many of us have been there at some point, but we work in a community where there's a lot of that. And so I really pray for them, pray for their families, and for all those who've been affected by the pandemic in different ways, financially, health-wise, just psychologically. There's just so much hurting out there, so we lift them up to God as well. So gracious and loving God, thank you for bringing us together today. Thank you for this conversation, which helps us to know you a little bit better. It helps to strengthen our faith and our reliance on you. And we ask you to continue to bless the Regis community and all members of it. This we ask through our Lord and our brother, Jesus Christ. Amen.
Amen.
Thank you both for being here. Thank you for this conversation. I could go on for hours with you both. I love these conversations, and I really, really appreciate your time. So thank you both, and I wish you a happy and holy week, and a blessed Easter. So
Thank you, Dan. Thank you, Trey,
for having
too.
us.
And thanks to Trey for making all this happen, the magic happen.
Makes the magic happen. He's going to take us out.